In the several roles I hold as business advisor, strategy, and board director, I have interacted with diverse types of investors who are determined at trying to find new business ventures worthy of their hard-earned money. And I find their frustration often surpasses that of entrepreneurial business leaders, sincerely looking for financial help. That's a lose-lose situation. So I have given a good bit of thought of how every business leader or entrepreneur can improve their odds and keep investors less frustrated at the same time. So my first suggestion is that business leaders or entrepreneurs need to forget that old myth that all they need to do is sketch an idea on a napkin and investors will all line up. There's much more to it. That approach may work for an entrepreneur who has just sold a successful business for a huge profit and is in the media, but it doesn't work for the rest of, entrepreneurs or business leaders who are not a proven success yet, or don't even have a business yet. Getting investors to trust you with their money is always a challenge. And it's even more difficult in the early stages where you don't have a significant revenue stream or a few customers, or maybe even a product yet. And at these stages, it's all about you and your ability to communicate, to narrate, and to execute effectively. So here is my list of red flags that cause many investors to look elsewhere. There are 9 of them. 1, undefined business model or a very low gross margins. Potential return on investment cannot be calculated without a clear understanding and evidence of actual costs, revenue, or revenue flows and margins. Marketing programs and distribution channels are definitely required for even the best of solutions with an appropriate and viable rollout and growth strategy. Number 2, a dysfunctional or non-functional team members or organizational structure. See, investors invest in people often more so than in the product itself or the solution that you're offering. Therefore, evidence of team members who don't fit or family members who don't have a role or evidence of conflicting priorities will quickly derail investor interest. All the internal teams need to have relevant skills and experience, and making sure that you have a good organizational structure set up with the right governance structures as well. And number 3, no well-defined need or viable customer set. Now, the most investable ventures stem from painful needs by customers who have money to spend. So nice to haves and easier to use products or social ventures needing government support are not likely to provide a financial return to investors. Investors expect a good value proposition in every pitch. And there might be a social impact as well, but make sure that there's a commercial element associated with that because you're looking at it from an investor's perspective. The next, non-credible funding request or unreasonable valuation. Investors are looking to buy a chunk of business, not the product. They need to know how much money you need and what portion of the current business you're willing to offer for the investment. Future unproven projections don't set today's valuation. So ask only for the money you can justify and do that in stage gates. The next principle, naive expectation on funding terms and processes. Experienced entrepreneurs understand investor expectations of board representation, preferred stock, equity, and payments based on interim milestones. Founder insistence on non-dilute clauses or, big, relationships and quick closures without due diligence will short circuit any active interest. And the next principle, solution development which is undefined or incomplete. Investors are most interested in providing money for scaling for a proven solution. They're not interested in research and development or funding at an idea stage. So for seed stage funding, entrepreneurs should be looking to friends and for family, crowdfunding and relevant institutions. But when you have a product, a solution, an ecosystem of customers, then it becomes even more interesting and relevant for investors. Next principle is the lack of intellectual property. So having a patent, trademark, or other barriers to entry are always a critical advantage in attracting funding, since investors need to see real commitment to beating competitors. Being first to market is not a strong competitive argument for startups or scale-ups, since larger existing players can easily overrun this position. So there's several things to be mindful for. The next principle is surprises during due diligence. So smart entrepreneurs and business leaders pre-disclose any possible due diligence issues with full and open explanations and no excuses. Due diligence also means normally involves on-site visits, for example, and employee discussions. So the entire team needs to be fully aware of expectations, and investors pass if they find conflicted team members. The next principle, and the last one, which is the lack of organizational setup. So your management team and advisory board or governance board are critical in this aspect. So certainly there are many other red flags that will discourage investors, but every entrepreneur will find that it pays big dividends to be proactive on the key items outlined as I did earlier. And if your startup or scale-up is dependent on investor funding, you should remember that your first competitors are peer startups who are also fighting for scarce resources. So make sure that you are managing, evaluating, and being vigilant. And your job is to stay a step ahead of them in professionalism, communication, and in preparation. Stay ahead of your peers by implementing innovative approaches. Now get this on your leadership and board agenda and consciously look at each of these elements, these principles, and make sure that you are keeping on top of it.